Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Miller, your host. I love to speak with someone who has a rich history in the food industry, and we have that someone with us today. He is the Vice President of Quality, Regulatory Affairs, and Sustainability for Suntory. Please welcome Kshitij Godlbole to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pam. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you're here. And, I am excited to talk about, I think, what is top of mind for you as far as what's important in the food industry. And I understand that's food safety and quality.
That's right.
Yeah, because you've done a lot of things, but that really is where your heart is. Why don't you share a little bit about why that's so important?
Um, so I have a bachelor's in chemical engineering, but then I ended up in food manufacturing.
Ah,
Part of it was maybe I didn't enjoy chemical engineering so much. Um, and then when I ended up in food manufacturing, it so happens that my first job was in quality assurance. And that's where I have been for close to 2 decades now. So that's why food safety and quality are extremely close to my heart. That's where most of my work has been. And that's what I'm most passionate about.
yeah, and there's a lot more involved in that. I mean, we as consumers on the receiving end of the good quality food that's been tested and we know that it's safe to eat, or certainly when it's not, boy, it's a big deal. I mean, we really have problems, but there's a lot that goes into that as far as, like you talked about in the manufacturing side and the
Mhm,
systems piece of it. I know you've spent a lot of time there.
mhm.
What kind of things do you consider when you're looking at getting the right systems in place?
Well, we tend to look at end-to-end supply chain when we talk about quality. So it starts from sourcing of the ingredients. So when we talk about from a supply chain perspective, we talk about right from how do we source the ingredients, how do we approve the right suppliers to do that, and then all the way from getting the ingredients in, testing them, using them in our manufacturing side, making the product, storing the product, shipping it out, and it goes into the stores. So we look at this entire chain to make sure that we are building quality. And that's on the supply chain side of things. But we also partner with our R&D and marketing teams to build the quality in the design of these products. So when R&D is designing these products, we are a partner in that process to ensure quality and food safety are paramount. They are being looked at. So we look at what is the end consumer that we have in mind. How is the product going to be stored? How is it going to be consumed? And that will then determine how the formulation should be, how the processing should be, what the shelf life should be, what kind of packaging it needs to make sure that the end consumer gets, first of all, a safe product and of the right quality to consume.
Yeah. Amazing. I don't think most of us think about all the steps in the supply chain from sourcing all the way through packaging and that R&D that you would partner with research and development even
Mhm.
in the design phase of your product. So taking it all the way through and lots of considerations along the way. I'm sure that you get involved in a lot of those things. You've worked with several large companies in the food industry as well.
Yeah, that's right. So one of my first major jobs was in the US with the company called Dr. Pepper Snapple. Now they're known as Curing Dr. Pepper. So I started with them in the quality of assurance function, um, worked with them in a few different factories across the US. After that, I took up the role with a company called Kerry Ingredients. It's an Irish company. Started with them in the US and then moved over on a new opportunity for Kerry in Malaysia. And then was with them for several years, looking after the Southeast Asian manufacturing sites, also in quality at a regional level. And then finally landed up in my recent company, Suntory, where I moved to Singapore. And now I look after the Asia Pacific operations. So,
Very interesting. And for our listeners, they may remember Carrie has been on our show speaking about sustainability efforts that they have in place and goals. So you can go back and listen to that episode, audience, if you'd like to. But talk about Singapore. So you're on the other side of the world from me. I'm in the United States, and we're really thankful for you to work out our schedules. And I know we worked on that to be able to have you on the show. But Singapore is, presents some different challenges. I mean, part of your job description is in that regulatory affairs area. And you talked about how, different that is within Asia and the different countries within Asia. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I don't think we think about that.
Yeah. So when we think about some of the bigger markets across the world, so we
Yeah.
talk about North America. Uh, you have regulations in the United States, you have regulations in Canada, and to a certain degree, they are synchronized. When you look at EU, well, most of the EU countries follow the EU regulations. So again, to a to a higher degree, they're synchronized.
Yeah.
But when you look at Asia, it's every country with its own regulations. Um, there is some overlap with the international standards like Codex. However, the countries are not there yet. They have either fully adopted these international standards, or within a certain group of nations, they have adopted a common set of standards. So, for instance, Singapore belongs to ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It's a group of 10 countries. And each of those countries have their own regulations.
Oh,
Certain part of the regulations would be based on Codex, others may not be. Now, there has been a focused, concerted effort across ASEAN region to come up with a unified set of standards. So there is work happening in that space, but we are still not there yet. So which means the reality is, as of now, we as a business have to consider every market regulation when we are looking to introduce products into all of these different countries in Asia.
wow. I hadn't really thought about that. So that will go all the way back to maybe some of the ingredients that you're putting in your products that may not fit regulations on the receiving end for whatever country you're planning on distributing that product in.
Absolutely, that's right. So when we talk about supply chain for our raw materials and packaging materials, it's a bit more complex because we source ingredients from all over the world.
Mm.
Um, and having to tap into that complex supply chain has become even more prevalent post COVID, where we are trying to diversify where we are getting the ingredients from. And what that means is we could be sourcing from Europe, we could be sourcing from South America, we source from China quite a lot. Um, Various Asian markets are supplying our ingredients. And what I just spoke, every country has different regulations. So if you source from a country in EU, then that particular supplier may be meeting the EU requirements, meeting the EU regulations. However, doesn't mean that that particular material will then meet our requirement in one of our Asian countries. So when we are making the product in Asia, we have to make sure that the product is meeting the regulation of our manufacturing country, as well as the countries where we will be selling the product. So even if we talk about Asia, it's still a global view we have to consider because the raw mats could be coming from anywhere.
Well, so when we think about operating worldwide, and certainly during the pandemic, the supply chain, as you brought up several times, was really a
Mm.
focus. And sometimes you just think, well, that's just as easy as finding another source. But really, what you're talking about is because of the regulations in these different Asian countries, depending on what's required, you may not be able to just switch the source because it may not comply once you get on the back end, and you're not going to go through making an entire product that you can't sell there. So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of complexity to just that one piece of your responsibility with Suntory.
Yeah, and that's the regulatory piece that I just
Yeah.
alluded to there. But even before that comes the food safety aspect of it and the quality aspect. So when we approve materials, yes, there is a regulation part, which the regulatory affairs team will deep dive into. But then we also have a supply quality team, which will look into the food safety aspect. So we look into the supplier credentials and the risks with the supplier. And we also look at the risks with the material itself. Um, so we have situations where a supplier could be meeting all our regulations, but from a food safety standpoint, they may not meet our standards. And we have Suntory standards to ensure the end food safety of our products. So when I talked about end-to-end supply chain at the beginning, then that takes into factor how are we qualifying our suppliers from a food safety and quality perspective. So there's a lot that goes into qualifying a supplier and a material in order to bring those to our doors in our factory.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about your regulation or your requirements for food safety and quality within your company. Let's talk about your company a little bit because culturally,
Mhm.
you have a Japanese founder, and that DNA runs through your company. And but you're also worldwide, and you have locations all over. And how do you have those line up? How do you try to get everybody on the same page as far as
Right.
culturally with a company so large and the like you said, the standards and the quality are really, really important. That's paramount.
Absolutely. You're right. So, yeah, Suntory started 125 years ago in the alcohol sphere. And since then, over the years, it has diversified. So I belong to a company within Suntory Holdings, which is called Suntory Beverage and Food, which is the non-alcohol arm of the company. Um, and we make tea, brewed teas and coffees and energy drinks and whatnot, right? And the history of the company is Japanese. And as we probably know, quality is paramount to the Japanese products. It's ingrained in how people think in Japan, and not just talking about Suntory, but in general, if you go to Japan and you observe how things are done, you realize attention to details to ensure that the consumer gets the highest quality is very much part of the Japanese culture.
Yeah.
Um, and you see this when you walk into a Suntory factory in Japan. Now, over the years, over the past several decades, Suntory has grown globally and it has ambitions to continue to evolve as a global company, not as simply as a Japanese company. Yeah? Um, so a lot of systems come out from Japan and then get horizontally deployed globally across our factories. The challenge comes in where I mentioned that in Japan, it's not just the company culture, it's sort of the country culture where quality is considered paramount and consumer satisfaction is considered paramount. Um, that becomes a challenge when you're trying to implement the same systems outside of Japan. There are cultural differences, there are economic differences, there are various challenges and limitations on how do we go about that.
Yeah.
So the company is very clear on one thing. We don't want to give up on that quality centric approach to everything that we do as a company. And therefore, we have to figure out ways on what will work in a global world. So outside of Japan, there are things which work in Japan, but may not necessarily translate well outside of Japan. So we are having to think of ways on how do we achieve the objectives that we set out as Suntory, as a Japanese company, but being a global organization. So we have to work with the local culture and on what we have got in each of our factories, each of our business units, in order to achieve that.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting to think about, culturally the approach that the founder of the company and the locations in Japan, because of that outgrowth of culture, take, and how do you translate that to a different country with a different culture to achieve the same result is really what you're trying to get. And people are only one piece of that, right? Because you also
Mhm.
have to figure out what are the systems that we need to have in place for that and what equipment do they, how are they working to achieve the
Yeah,
same goals? Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, uh, the most important piece, as you just said, are the people, right? And if you talk about quality culture, it starts from the top. Now, we are lucky in the sense that because it has this very strong DNA of the Japanese quality mindset, with the senior leadership, there is a very strong buy-in of having that no compromise on quality attitude. And that is always helpful when you're trying to set the right culture in any company, in any workplace. Um,
Absolutely.
and when we move on from there, so then we talk about PPT, people, process, and technology. So traditionally, there have been systems in many places, I won't say everywhere, but in many places where you have if you talk about manufacturing, you have a quality department, and you have a production, and then you have maintenance, and you have maybe an operational excellence team. And these tend to work in silos, vertical silos. And what we are trying to change in Suntory is break these silos. So instead of having structures, organizations vertically, now we are taking a slash at it horizontally. So which means we have now developed uh, skills matrix, which are more horizontal in the sense that we are expecting our employees to have skill sets from quality, from production, doing some maintenance work, having some skill sets with operational excellence. So basically, with the different levels within the organization, we have a skills matrix which cuts across the different pillars in the organization. And you're having a multi-skilled workforce who all have a certain portion of their job with specific focus on quality. So quality is no longer a quality assurance or quality control functions role. Now the accountability was everyone, and that helps build a quality culture. That helps build quality into the design of the process. And then there's the technology part, right? So technology is continuously evolving. Now we have more digital tools. We have AI. So we are now working on how will the technology help eliminate some of the mundane tasks, repetitive tasks, reduce the human errors, make the data more visible and actionable. So we are building in technology into our systems and processes, whether it's a manufacturing process or our work processes, workflows. So where technology can help take us a step further in our journey.
Yeah. I really like that idea of, I'm thinking of it as cross-pollination
Mhm,
across with your skill sets, going across. So, it's just not one department's responsibility for quality or sustainability or whatever area it might be. Like everybody has a piece in that. For
mhm,
like food safety, if you're aware of an issue, if
mhm,
you're working in somewhere in the supply chain and there's an issue that's going to affect food safety or quality, that's your responsibility to bring that out. We've got to figure that out. So when everybody
mhm,
can have a piece of the things that are important to the company, and like you said, from the top down, that makes it even better, right? Because you
mhm.
have the buy-in from all of management and leadership to implement all of
Absolutely.
this. So that's really great. Well, Suntory also has a bit of a philanthropic focus, but that I would love for you to share about as I was looking on your website that you're very involved with water uh, in different areas. If you could share some of the initiatives that Suntory has undertaken.
Absolutely. So water is probably the most important ingredient that we have. It's actually the heart of our product. We're talking about beverages here.
Yeah.
Um, so for Suntory, uh, playing a key role in water conservation comes with it because we consider it as a responsibility towards our future generations. So we have a program in Suntory which started in Japan 20 years back. It's called Mizu Iku. It's a Japanese term. So Mizu is water. Iku is a term for education. So it's water education. Yeah. And what that program does is it engages with school children. We partner with schools to educate the children on water conservation. We teach them the water cycle. We have lessons. We teach them through experimentation. We take them on field trips. So basically, we are training, teaching, educating the next generation on where does water come from. It's not sufficient for them to know it comes from the tap at the home. They need to know where is water coming from and where does it end up. So after it gets lost in the sink or your bathroom, where does it end up, right? So understanding that entire cycle is important for children. Um, so we have we have this program where so far we have hundreds of thousands of school children across various nations, various countries being educated on this entire cycle of water conservation.
Yeah. What a great initiative to start where the education is. Well, first of all, you have the goals within your company as far as conservation and being very responsible with this valuable resource, but then you're also paying it forward by educating the next generation and giving them, the value of the water so that they're going to treat it with respect and have the same
Absolutely.
attitude. I just love that. And I like what Suntory is doing in that area. Thank you for sharing that. Before we go, Kshitij, is there any other information you would like to share with our audience? Because this has been just so informative from a worldwide company that's based in, in Asia. We really appreciate all the information that you've shared with us.
No, actually, thanks a lot for giving me this platform to tell you a little bit about what I've done or what we're doing with my organization. So I appreciate that opportunity. Um, my only advice for our viewers is to educate themselves on our sustainability goals as a nation and as responsible citizens. Understand what are the challenges that we are facing and what role can we play. When I talked about Mizuiko, that's exactly what we're teaching the children. How do they play a role for now and for years to come in ensuring we have fresh, clean drinking water for everyone? So let's make sure we're educating ourselves and people around us on what small steps can we take, which will eventually make a big difference for us and for our next generations.
Yes. Thank you for that last word. I appreciate it. And Future Foodcasts appreciates you, our audience, for watching and listening. Please leave us comments. There will be links in the show notes so you can check out Suntory and the initiatives they have going, as well as their products that they have across the world. Until next time, I'm Pam Miller.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcasts. Future Foodcasts is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.